You work 8 hours a day. Or you are supposed to. Or you feel guilty when you don't. The 8-hour workday is so embedded in modern life that it feels like a fact of nature. A biological given, like sleeping 8 hours and eating 3 meals. It is not. It is a political settlement, arrived at through decades of strikes, violence, legislation, and negotiation between workers and industrialists, who each wanted something the other controlled. And the version of that story you were probably told, that Henry Ford invented the 8-hour workday because he discovered it made his workers more productive, is, at best, half true. At worst, it is a story that erases the people who actually fought for it. Let's go back to the beginning. Before industrialization, work did not have fixed hours. Agricultural labor was governed by daylight, season, and the demands of the land. You worked when there was work to do and rested when there wasn't. The Industrial Revolution changed this completely. Factories required coordination. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of workers in the same place at the same time, operating machinery that could not be stopped without cost. Factory owners maximized their investment by maximizing operating hours. In the early decades of industrialization in Britain and America, 12, 14, and 16-hour workdays were standard. Children worked the same hours as adults. There were no weekends. There was no concept of a weekend. The first organized resistance came from British textile workers in the 1810s. They did not ask for 8 hours. They asked for 10, a reduction so modest by modern standards that it is difficult to comprehend how radical it seemed at the time. The movement for a 10-hour workday took 30 years, and an act of parliament to achieve in Britain. In America, it took until 1840, when President Martin Van Buren signed an executive order establishing a 10-hour day for federal government workers. Private industry ignored it entirely. The 8-hour movement began in earnest with a slogan that appeared in Australian labor organizing in 1856. 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest. The demand was mathematically elegant. Divide the 24 hours of the day into 3 equal parts and give workers sovereignty over 2 of them. It took 30 more years for that demand to become the central organizing principle of the labor movement in America. The date May 1st, 1886, now celebrated as International Workers' Day in most of the world, marked the beginning of a coordinated national strike across America demanding the 8-hour workday. 340,000 workers walked out. In Chicago, at the McCormick harvesting machine plant, striking workers clashed with police. 2 workers were killed. The following day, at a rally in Haymarket Square called to protest the killings, someone threw a bomb into the crowd of police. 7 police officers and at least 4 civilians died. 8 labor organizers, most of whom had not been at Haymarket that night, were arrested, tried, and 4 of them hanged. The Haymarket affair set the 8-hour movement back by years. The strikers were associated with violence and anarchism in the public press. The demand itself was made to seem dangerous, and yet the movement did not stop. By 1890, the 8-hour day had become the central demand of the emerging trade union movement globally. Now Henry Ford. In 1914, Henry Ford introduced the 8-hour workday and the 5-day week at his Highland Park plant. He also doubled wages. This is the part of the story that got remembered. Ford's explanation was straightforward and has been repeated ever since. Workers who are rested and paid fairly are more productive, and productive workers make more cars, which means more profit. He described it as the most cost-cutting move he ever made. This is true. Ford did introduce the 8-hour day. Ford did benefit from it. Ford did describe it in terms of productivity and profit. But Ford did not invent the demand. The demand had existed for 60 years before Ford adopted it. Hundreds of thousands of workers had been fired, beaten, and in some cases killed fighting for it. Ford adopted a demand that workers had already won in some industries and were actively fighting for in others. And he adopted it because it was economically rational for him to do so once the labor market made it so. Calling Ford the inventor of the 8-hour workday is like calling the man who finally unlocked a door the inventor of the key. The workers made the key. They just couldn't turn it alone. The version of history where Ford gives workers the 8-hour day as a gift of enlightened capitalism serves a particular narrative, that good working conditions are the product of benevolent employers, not organized worker resistance. That narrative is not neutral. It is an argument about power, specifically, about where the credit for workers' rights should be located. If Ford gave workers the 8-hour day, then workers owe their conditions to the goodwill of employers. If workers fought for 60 years and Ford adopted their demand when it became profitable to do so, then workers' conditions are the product of organized resistance. These are not equivalent stories. They lead to completely different conclusions about what workers should do when their conditions are inadequate. The legal 8-hour day in America came not from Ford, but from the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, 24 years after Ford's Highland Park decision, and 52 years after the Haymarket Massacre. It passed because of sustained political pressure from organized labor over decades. It was opposed by business interests who argued it would destroy the economy. The economy was not destroyed. The 40-hour week, 5 days of 8 hours, became federal law. Ford had adopted it voluntarily in 1914 because it was profitable. The law required it in 1938 because not everyone was Ford. Today, the 8-hour day is under pressure from a different direction. Remote work, gig economy contracts, always-on communication technology, and the collapse of the boundary between work and personal time have functionally extended the working day for many knowledge workers well beyond 8 hours. The name has been preserved, while the reality has shifted. You might work 8 hours officially, and another 2 answering messages after dinner, and another hour checking in on a Sunday morning. The 8-hour day exists as a legal standard. It does not exist as a lived reality for a growing proportion of the workforce. The people who fought for it are not here to notice. Their names are not on posters. Their faces are not on the currency. The Haymarket martyrs, the 4 men hanged in 1887 after a trial that their own judge admitted was legally questionable, are remembered in most of the world on May 1st. In America, Labor Day is in September, moved there by Congress in 1894, specifically to separate American workers from the international labor movement and its association with the Haymarket events. The 8-hour day has a price tag on it, paid in full, by people whose names you probably don't know. August Spies, who was hanged, said from the scaffold, "The time will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you are throttling today." The silence has been very powerful. Powerful enough to replace the story of the workers who died for the 8-hour day with the story of the industrialist who adopted it when it suited him. That replacement did not happen by accident. It happened because one story serves employers and the other serves workers, and employers have more control over which stories get taught. The 8-hour day is yours. Not Ford's gift. Not the natural order of things. A negotiated settlement, extracted through decades of resistance, from people who had every reason to give up and didn't. The next time you leave work at 5 o'clock, you are exercising a right that people died to establish. They did not die so that Ford could be credited for it. They died so that you could leave at 5. The least the history can do is tell you who they were. Albert Parsons, August Spies, Adolf Fischer, George Engel, hanged on November 11th, 1887. For the 8 hours you take for granted, the labor movement did not ask Ford for the 8-hour day. What I keep thinking about, the Haymarket Memorial in Chicago exists and is accessible. Most Americans have never heard of it. Labor Day was moved to September specifically to separate it from international workers' movements. These are documented policy decisions. The erasure was deliberate. The labor movement made the 8-hour day economically rational for Ford. There is a difference. The difference is everything. Ford got the credit. Workers got the hours. History got the wrong story. The record is available. The Haymarket trial transcripts are preserved. The 1,886 strike records are documented. The 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act is public law. None of this is secret. None of this is disputed by labor historians. The correct version of this story is taught in labor history courses. It is not taught in business schools. It is not on the wall of Ford's museum in Dearborn, Michigan. It is not in the motivational literature about Ford's genius for management. It is here. 8 hours. Paid for in full.